What's up, gaggers? Today I want to discuss something that was once very near and dear to me, and that is PlayStation Home, the free game that was exclusively released to the PlayStation 3 console. PlayStation Home was a virtual 3D social game where you could hang out with people virtually, play with friends or even strangers, and play mini games, decorate your own spaces, socialize, and do plenty of other activities. Whether it be due to rose-tinted glasses or they sincerely had a great time playing the game back in the day, a lot of people remember their time playing PlayStation Home fondly. However, it wouldn't be totally true to claim that PlayStation Home was all great and every interaction was good. It definitely had major issues surrounding the social elements of the game throughout its original lifespan, and a lot of toxic stuff did happen, from harassment to doxing to everything in between and even beyond. But this video won't be covering PlayStation Home from when it was alive and ran by Sony. Today I want to go over the efforts to preserve the game and how those who seek to preserve it undermine themselves by doing things that are ultimately anti-preservation. It's a tale that involves drama, criminal acts such as threats, hacking, and booting, and much more. This video will be going over how the communities that want to preserve and make PlayStation Home playable after nearly 10 years of the game closing servers engage in terrible anti-preservationist practices. Now, if you're like me, you played PlayStation Home while it was still operated by Sony. But after the servers shut down, the story, probably for most people and maybe even you watching, ended there. But you may have seen some very good news, and that good news came from a video documentary published by IGN in 2021. In the video, we were given hope that there were people out there trying to preserve PlayStation Home in their own right. But the main focus I'll draw attention to is Destination Home, who seemed to be the precursory group that would lead efforts to preserve PlayStation Home as a whole. In the IGN documentary, we are presented with words of Nagato, the main spokesperson who represents Destination Home, and he too delivers messages of hope that PlayStation Home would, one day, be preserved, partially or wholly, and be playable online. Amassing hundreds of thousands of views, the IGN video covering the PlayStation Home revival and preservation movement was a massive boon for Destination Home, as more and more people were now aware of the movement, and filled with hope that a game they once loved would be possibly coming back. Destination Home benefited from IGN signal boosting and propelling their movement forward, but one major aspect of the IGN documentary was incredibly wrong. The information was correct, but the tone wasn't. IGN's Dale Driver presented the story in a very positive light, but even if you take the slightest glance on what's underneath the surface, you'll see how the preservation of PlayStation Home is incredibly flawed. But let's go back to the beginning of the preservation movement of PlayStation Home. Sony's PlayStation Home closed down operations on March 31st, 2015. Within just a few days, though, people had already started preserving the game by uploading their cached PlayStation Home data to GitHub. Just for reference, the reason why cached data is brought up here and will be discussed throughout the rest of this video is because preserving PlayStation Home requires cached data. See, PlayStation Home was run on servers ran by Sony. Once those servers shut down, all of PlayStation Home was lost. Well, not exactly. You see, in order to improve load times and ease of access from the console to PlayStation Home on the servers, some data was actually saved locally to the PlayStation 3 when a player would access PlayStation Home when it was still up and running. This data was stored in cache files associated with one's PlayStation Home on their personal PlayStation 3 console. To get cache data off the console and to the internet to preserve them is quite complex and convoluted, as it requires jailbreaking a PS3 that had PlayStation Home actually played on, and then dumping the file to something like a USB drive, and then uploading that data somewhere, like a GitHub or Discord if you're looking to help other people looking to preserve the game. But that's what I mean when I say cache data, just data that was stored in the PlayStation 3, despite Sony running their own servers that had the game. As I said earlier in the video, the start of the preservation effort of PlayStation Home surrounds mostly a project known as Destination Home. At the time, no other groups existed to preserve PlayStation Home, and even to this day there are realistically only 2 or 3, depending on how you see the situation. Before 2019, progress on Destination Home previously advertised as PlayStation Home Unofficial, had been very limited as efforts to preserve the game as well as load it offline were difficult. However, during 2019 and into 2020, a lot of progress was made to Destination Home's PlayStation Home offline build. But why exactly is this the case? Well, as it turned out, a former developer of PlayStation Home actually leaked a software development kit of the last build of PlayStation Home sometime after the project asked for people to donate any and all software of PlayStation Home. Prior to this, the Destination Home team only had access to an old version of the development kit, but getting the new one was greatly beneficial in making massive leaps of progress. But seemingly, one of the first major dramas for the preservation effort of PlayStation Home happened in Destination Home's progress. On May 1st, 2020, a team member of Destination Home supposedly had leaked an internal tool that they were using to work on PlayStation Home. This ended up being the development kit that was leaked to them by an ex-PlayStation Home developer who goes by the name of Pongo. Seemingly why the Destination Home team was upset by this is because Destination Home, although they are not-for-profit, maintain, even to this day, they want to make developments to the Destination Home project privately and closed source. So leaking a tool they were using was frustrating to them since, well, it was never supposed to be public. The problem was, though, that the person who leaked the development kit outside of Destination Home was Pongo, the person who leaked Destination Home the development kit in the first place. Another person in this story, Devil303, would criticize Destination Home later in 2022 by showing the team's clear hypocrisy. On one hand, they wanted people from the public, not directly associated with them, to get them a developer kit for the final version of PlayStation Home as it was when it ended in 2015. But when someone comes and gives it to them, they ultimately turn around and say it's illegal and wrong to share the tool. When it benefited them and they got the tool, that was most likely illegally obtained and distributed, by the way, they gladly accepted. But when other people get their hands on the tool, they got very, very upset, even though the ex-developer who leaked it just so happened to leak it to another group of people. Also in this announcement, where the Destination Home team claimed a leak had happened, they also said they'd potentially cease working on offline builds. However, later on during the same month, May 2020, Destination Home would release another offline update to their game. Offline would ultimately be dropped by Destination Home, though, in order to pursue efforts to make it fully playable online. But this seemingly happened also in major part because two prominent people working on PlayStation Offline had a lot of strife with other people in Destination Home during and prior to 2020. The two prominent people were Jumpsuit and someone named Splicewave. Splicewave is someone who often gets a lot of the credit for making major progress to PlayStation Home Offline and making it functional and playable, as well as helping people actually play the game by creating tutorials on YouTube. The problem with Splicewave, although he was a prominent and important figure to PlayStation Home Offline, was that in subsequent years after 2020, he lashed out on other people in the community, including people from Destination Home. Now, he has since apologized for his outbursts, but they included snarkily worded messages about someone's docs, and even death threats, even saying, quote, seriously considering killing, redacted for the purposes of this video, not joking about the last bit either, unquote. These events, among other arguments regarding the halting of the offline mode of PlayStation Home and differences in general, led Destination Home to ban and dissociate with Jumpsuit, Devil303, and Splicewave. Splicewave and others who were excommunicated from Destination Home would make their own preservation community known as Home Headquarters sometime in either 2022 or 2023. But besides the advancements of offline PlayStation Home, Home Headquarters isn't a major player in the advancement of preserving PlayStation Home. They're more so just a community that's very separate from Destination Home. But in mid-2023, another group was formed to also make PlayStation Home playable once again, also with a focus online. This group, unlike Destination Home, vowed to make progress public and open source, and this group is Home Laboratory. Home Laboratory was founded by Agent Dark 447, who is the last person I'll introduce in this section. As a summary, there are realistically two preservation groups in the PlayStation Home revival scene. And those are Destination Home and Home Laboratory. Destination Home has plenty of staff who operate their own community and servers, but I won't be covering each and every person from Destination Home, but some people will be coming up from there shortly. Home Laboratory won't be talked about too much in this video, but at some points they are mentioned. And finally, the third group I mentioned, Home Headquarters, will be relevant at some points, but for now, I want to cover the many fundamental flaws of the preservation scene of PlayStation Home, which unfortunately do skew against Destination Home, as they are by far the largest quote-unquote preservation group in the scene. As I mentioned earlier, Destination Home frequently asked and still asks for cache data from the public. Evidence from this can be found in that IGN video as well as a Reddit post from all the way back on January 13, 2020 to the subreddit r/emulation, where Nagato, the main spokesperson at the time and project lead to this day, made a post asking for donations. And you can still upload any cache data you may have from PlayStation Home to their Discord server to this day, as advertised on their official X account and their Discord. Which, this all makes sense, right? A group that wants to preserve PlayStation Home asks the public for donated cache data so they can continue to preserve PlayStation Home. On the surface, there is nothing obviously wrong here. However, it's what they do with the cache data, or what they don't do with it, that goes against the spirit of preservation. In the preservation scene, there's something known as hoarding, which is seen by many to be anti-preservation. Hoarding and preservation is boiled down to a person or group that collects a bunch of digital assets and does anything from making it barely accessible to not having it be accessible at all. Destination Home actually does this. They make their cache data that was donated by the public not accessible. At first they did. Pre-2022, they shared their collected cache data publicly. But in June 2022, Destination Home said that sharing cache data wouldn't be a priority as confirmed by Knight, a prominent member in the staff of Destination Home, with someone known as Julia, or SCRC, or Sly Cooper Reload Coded, who I will be calling Sly for the duration of the video. Now, Sly has actually extensively researched and documented most of the controversies that have occurred in the PlayStation Home preservation space in her various documents, as well as her YouTube channel. In her first document titled Home's Foundations Are Crumbling, she actually summarizes and goes over each main claim made by Knight in the previously presented screenshot between her and Knight. The claims are as follows. 1. GitHub had a hard time handling all the files, so they were looking for someplace better to put them. 2. It's hard to organize the hundreds of caches they've gotten, as it's not nearly a one-man job. And 3. It's a very low priority for them. Now, each of these claims are, on their face, not lies. GitHub does have issues showing repositories that have thousands of individual files. But that doesn't mean that someone can't download it, though. It just means that sifting through each and every single file will be difficult, if not impossible, on GitHub. Now, onto the second part of Knight's, that it's difficult to sift through and organize the hundreds of caches they've received. This point fails to address the fact that other groups with the same size, if not smaller teams, actually can and do sift through and organize all their received cache data. And another thing is, Destination Home does receive cache data and will sift through and quickly implement it into their version of PlayStation Home. For example, on March 7, 2024, someone donated their cache data that actually had never before donated data. 3 days later, on March 10, 2024, it was implemented into Destination Home's build of PlayStation Home. So to summarize the rebuttals of the first 2 points, issues with GitHub really don't prevent Destination Home from uploading cache data there. There are downsides to GitHub, but it would still be possible to upload the full repository of cache data there. It's also said it's difficult and time-consuming to sift through all the cache data that Destination Home receives. Now look, I don't doubt that it takes a lot of time and effort. But again, other projects like Home Laboratory do it, so it clearly can be done. But besides that, they have a pretty quick turnaround if they receive cache data, at least in one certain instance, so clearly they can prioritize and get things done in a quick manner. So now with the final point of it all, that they simply aren't prioritizing the uploading and sharing of cache data. This is very anti-preservation and spits in the face of everyone who has donated their cache data for the hopes of one day fully preserving PlayStation Home. Not only because it doesn't share publicly what people from the public have given them, but also that the low priority point seems to be a lie on its face, since, if it was a low priority, at least it would have been done at some point. Prior to February 2025, the last update to the GitHub for all the collected cache data of PlayStation Home that Destination Home has received was June 2022. Destination Home said they would, sometime in the future, upload received cache data, which can be seen in older donation messages that displayed in Destination Home's server when someone would upload cache data, only for that promise to ultimately disappear at some point in new donation messages. Destination Home claimed they'd update their public-facing repository of cache data that they source from the public, only to not update that up to the making of this video in February 2025. But, just as a note, the situation is changing, however, and I'll mention what that means at the end of the video. So, without access to all the donated cache data, it is impossible to ensure that PlayStation Home will forever be preserved. I actually want to quote Sly here, where she gives an apt quote to illustrate the situation in her initial document, saying, quote, "Collector, would you please sell me your collector's item so I can be the one to lock it away instead," unquote. Destination Home is looking to the public and asking for donations because Sony closed down their servers, thus killing the official release of PlayStation Home. Then Destination Home comes into the scene as a hero who has come to preserve and save PlayStation Home, and all they need is your cache data. However, once they get that data, at least after June 2022, they keep it to themselves. It begs the question, if they're hoarding their collector's item to themselves, what happens if Destination Home were to disappear like how Sony's PlayStation Home did? What if they closed the project down one day and were never seen again? Well, the hoarded data, if it wouldn't be released in some final hurrah, would be lost, which of course goes against the whole idea of preservation, since if it happened with Sony, it can of course happen to a non-profit preservation group. That's the reason it is imperative that cache data sourced from the public be released back to the public so it can't be lost again. But that's not even the worst case of Destination Home, the chief preservation movement of PlayStation Home, being anti-preservation. As I mentioned earlier, other groups do exist that wish to preserve PlayStation Home. Just like Destination Home, they also require cache data to fulfill that goal. Strangely enough, though, Destination Home would later implement a message that is sent to the person donating cache data that actually persuades the donator to not give their cache data to other groups. And the message reads as follows: "Thank you for your donation. It has come to our attention that members of another PlayStation Home revival group use alt accounts to DM our cache donators, encouraging them to also donate their cache to them. Whilst we would never tell you what you shouldn't do with your own files, we'd advise against donating your data to this group, reporting any accounts that DM you about it to our staff. This other revival group steals work from us, have in the past threatened or harassed our staff players, and perpetuated misinformation or lies about our project. Sorry for any inconvenience, and thank you again for your support." The portion about harassment is talking about, in part, the Splicewave situation, which is obviously bad as he represents Home Headquarters, and distally even Home Laboratory, as he is a member there and does collaborate with the people from that community. The stealing code thing actually is proven fact, as Home Laboratory at some point did use XMLs for their PlayStation Home server that did have references to Destination Home, which was quickly rectified, and the explanation given was that Home Laboratory got the XMLs from someone else, but the oversight still did happen and was used against them. Even if it was a mistake, a closed source project did have a portion of their work stolen from them, which isn't a lie. Now look, the message given obviously states that they're not saying to not donate their cache data to other preservation and revival groups. But clearly with the evidence provided and the way it's phrased, it's heavily slanted so that people won't give their cache data to any other group besides Destination Home. Additionally, it even suggests to report any accounts that reach out, seemingly to get those alt accounts kicked from the server, since people from other servers need to reach out to get cache data because Destination Home doesn't publicly release all their hoarder cache data. So, not only is Destination Home not uploading all the donated cache data, but when other revival groups want to get that data so they can also preserve PlayStation Home, albeit separately from Destination Home, they are signaled out and have their groups shown in the worst possible light to spite them. Yes, Home Headquarters, founded by Splicewave, a dude who literally wanted someone in the community dead, is bad. Home Laboratory, once using code from Destination Home, a closed source project, is also bad. But if you call yourself a preservation group, you shouldn't freely take people's donated cache data and do everything short of blatantly stating that they shouldn't donate to other groups. Preserving games shouldn't include taking public donations, then pulling the ladder up from behind you once you receive it so that no one else can get access to that data. If you got beef with other groups, you don't have to dissuade donators from giving their cache data by messages sent to donators and just the overall sentiment shown toward other groups in the revival scene. Your project vowed to make all the cache data public anyways. There is no reason to gatekeep Sony's PlayStation Home. Now, moving on to a topic that's broad but will make sense toward the end of this segment is emulation. A large part of the preservation movement is the preservation of hardware. You see, as time progresses, hardware decays. Consoles you grew up playing on will inevitably die and cease to work. That's just how all technology is. Without maintenance, upkeep, and repair, at some point every console that's ever been made and ever will be made will stop working. One way to combat this inevitability is emulation. Emulators are not hardware, but software that aim to recreate what the original hardware of consoles were able to do. So for example, an emulator like RPCS3, which you can download for your PC, actually allows people to take PlayStation 3 games and load them up and play them, all without using a PlayStation 3 console. Now, not all emulators are open source, but the predominant PS3 emulator is, undoubtedly, RPCS3, an open source emulator. And RPCS3 actually has a license agreement that allows for and demands the following of keeping the software free. Technically, that means free as in you don't have to purchase it, but also free as in you can use it however you want. If you want to make changes to the software, that's fine. If you want to use that software to run a certain game, that's also fine. All of this is covered in the license agreement RPCS3 uses, which is known as the GNU General Public License version 2, or GPL 2.0 for short. Now, this license goes into depth about a lot of issues, and I'll briefly touch on them here. For the purpose of this video, what you mostly need to know is that the GPL2 license practically states that if you are to use the licensed software, like RPCS3, you are completely free to do so. However, if you make any modifications to that software and wish to distribute it, then you must release the source code of that software, as it is in the public interest to know what exactly the program does. If you're familiar with GitHub and the like, this is equivalent to publishing a fork of a software you make changes to. Basically, like RPCS3, which is totally open source and anyone can see how it works and operates, if you want to make your own version of it that fits your own needs as well as distribute it, you must then also distribute it fully open source so that others can see what you've done with it and perhaps even make changes to the main branch of the software to improve it for everyone else. Now, as you can imagine, in order to play PlayStation Home on something like a PC, you must then emulate. Thus, all predominant preservation groups in the PlayStation Home revival scene do actually use RPCS3. The issue actually lies with how Destination Home used it, however. As I mentioned before, Destination Home is a closed source project. Unique code, tools, and other developer software that they create is to be strictly used by them unless they give their consent. But of course, if they use RPCS3 and make changes to it for their own project, then it is absolutely required that they publish their version of RPCS3 for the whole world to see. RPCS3 is an emulator that is currently open source, meaning people who wanted the program to be open source developed it and have allowed anyone who wants to do anything with it to have the right to do so. Breaking their GPL license would obviously be wrong. You can't just take a program that a group mostly developed then turn around and use it and change it for your own means, and then go back and not follow what they wanted their program to follow. If RPCS 3 says that all forks and branch versions of the software must be open source where the source code is freely displayed, then that's just how it needs to be. With that all being said, Sly Cooper Reload Coded actually blew the lid on how Destination Home doesn't follow the GPL2 license. In her video titled, quote, How Destination Home Violates RPCS 3's GPL 2.0 license, Proof plus My Concerns, unquote, Sly shows thoroughly how Destination Home does have their own version of RPCS 3 for their own version of PlayStation Home. However, nowhere in their GitHub do they actually display and fully show the source code of their version of RPCS 3, even though there are certain sections in their build that claim to point to the source code. She goes through every Destination Home contributor page, pages linked in the RPCS 3 build made by Destination Home, and even the RPCS 3 page for Destination Home itself, and she could not find the source code. Again, despite there being files that claim to be the source code, there was actually none even in those files. Of course, we can't prove malicious intent. It is possible that this issue was just an oversight. But no matter what, whether you wish to give the benefit of the doubt or fully believe they did this maliciously, it is clear that the source code was not present in their project, which is a clear violation of the GPL license, the RPCS 3, and all branches of it must follow. Now I need to mention, as mentioned in Sly's video's description exposing the GPL situation, as of February 6, 2025, Destination Home has taken down their RPCS 3 build from their GitHub. And at least as of February 18, 2025, the most recent build has still yet to be put back up in order to get everything ready for GPL compliance. This is very likely the case because RPCS 3 has actually been made aware of the situation, and even GNU, the people behind the GPL license, have also been made aware of the issue. So, all this points to all parties knowing. GNU, RPCS 3, and Destination Home each know of the wrongdoing. It is arguable that GNU does know, though, to be fair, but even assuming they don't, RPCS 3 has been made aware, and Destination Home has been too, as evidenced by this displaying on their GitHub when you try to download it. But again, this situation is currently developing, so it is possible that at the time of releasing this video, this situation has changed. If something has changed and I see it or am made aware, I'll update the description of the video with any corrections and updates. It is blatantly clear that Destination Home was breaking the GPL license that RPCS 3 follows, and even by Destination Home's own admission. Now, this is clearly bad, and I won't lay it on any thicker in this section, but please keep that in mind as we go further into the next section and even into the conclusions of this video. But finally, I want to bring your attention to something else that happened in the PlayStation Home revival scene, and that is bootings levied against a different revival group. I need to reiterate a few things for this section of the video. Destination Home, the largest community for preserving PlayStation Home, is the major player in all of the revival space for PlayStation Home. Home Headquarters is a separate community aside from Destination Home that was founded because prominent members of Destination Home were ousted. These are two groups and communities that bicker back and forth. Now, Destination Home does work to keep the drama down to a minimum, but Home Headquarters makes it pretty apparent that they don't like Destination Home. You could liken it to an anti-community of sorts, but they do host their own PlayStation Home online server where people in their community and Discord can join and have fun, chat, and play together. So on the surface, they may be discounted as a group of haters, but they do just want to play and enjoy the game they love, PlayStation Home. The reason why I'm prefacing that here is because, again, we know that the founder of Home Headquarters has done bad stuff in the past. And there are other instances of Home Headquarters being difficult and spiteful against Destination Home, which I haven't included for the sake of keeping this long video somewhat shorter, but realistically speaking, no matter what, even if people from one community don't like people in the other, it only makes sense that in a revival and preservation community, all sub-communities are welcome. The end goal of reviving and preserving a game is to have anyone who wishes to play it again, or own it again, be able to do so. But once again, defying all expectations of what a revival and preservation group should do, Prominent members of Destination Home, including project lead of the project at the time, Zeph, actually sought the downfall of Home Headquarters, a community of imperfect people just looking to play PlayStation Home. Now, the rabbit hole for this runs deep, which begins with Zeph planning on orchestrating a conspiracy that dealt with the releasing of Home Headquarters dev chats and causing strife amongst those in Home Headquarters. The conspiracies, however, actually culminated in a major attack, and alleged series of attacks, against Home Headquarters. In a Discord server named Suck It, obviously a screw you to Home Headquarters, Zeph, amongst others in the PlayStation Home revival scene, were present to see an attack occur directly on Home Headquarters during an event that was scheduled in their Discord server. Now, Sly covers this in her document and supplies archival links to the evidence, but as of right now, Splicewave, the founder of Home Headquarters, has a video that chronicles the whole ordeal and even links to full videos that were leaked to him regarding the attack ran by the Suck It server, and I'll play a bit of it here, but just for reference, I did splice it up a bit here and there.
As many of you already know, my PS Home server, known as Home Headquarters, has an event pretty much every weekend on PS Home, where everyone can meet up and have a good time just like the old days. Now, back in August 2024, at a few of these events, or any large gathering of people in a space at once, my server was actually targeted for attack by a few mysterious people who kept joining my server and booting people out of the game, including me, repeatedly on multiple days, especially at events. Recently, I've been sent definitive proof of who was behind these attacks on my server, and one of them was the former Home Headquarters admin Cammy, who has recently left the PS Home revival scene as a whole. And the other two were Destination Home staff members at the time. That's right, it was Doobs and Zeph. And yes, Zeph, the current DH project lead. But what you're seeing on screen now is Cammy's screen while he was broadcasting to others in a Discord voice channel in a Discord server that was actually named Suck It, which is being recorded by someone else. And as you can see, Zeph is in there with him, giving him guidance on how to best attack my server by locking me out of it. And like I said before, this wasn't just a one-off attack. This happened on several different days, and in this screenshot you can see Zeph and Doobs planning their next attack on Home Headquarters at the 1-year anniversary event on August 30th.
Amongst all the other shenanigans that were occurring around this time, this was clearly a booting. Something unbefitting of any group of people who are hoping to see a game be preserved and enjoyed by a community. On August 17, 2024, Cammy, someone who was once associated with Home Headquarters and Home Laboratory, more distally, abused exploits in the server ran by Home Headquarters, all while people, including a project lead of Destination Home, cheered and laughed as people who were just trying to play a game they love were booted at an event. And as alleged by Splicewave, multiple events. And once things were starting to get patched so bootings couldn't occur anymore, Zeph was self-admittedly frustrated as new security features proved difficult to work around. And I should mention here, the exploits looked into and abused dealt with an impersonation exploit that deals with RPCN, which is an open source server that emulates the peer-to-peer matchmaking which was done on the PlayStation 3. Funnily enough, this is a project that, as the name suggests, is aligned with RPCS3. The same RPCS3 that has the GPL agreement that was, admittedly by Destination Home, not complied with before. And now there is evidence of a project lead abusing exploits apparent via impersonation on a version of RPCN. So what does this all mean? Well, I'll tell you. Simply and plainly, you were lied to. We were all lied to. From when the first IGN documentary came out, we were all presented with a beautiful, hopeful prospect for PlayStation Home, that it would be preserved and playable once again. Even in the follow-up documentary, we were shown even greater achievements from Destination Home, the group that doesn't want to see PlayStation Home die. But this characterization of Destination Home is not what it appears. Just doing a minute amount of digging reveals lies on top of drama, on top of even more dishonesty. And what is the biggest lie of them all? Well, Destination Home, despite claiming the contrary, is not a preservation group, or at the very least, doesn't behave like one. Sure, Destination Home does seek to revive PlayStation Home, and it's done so to a certain extent. They have their own online server you can play on PS3 and on PC, which is obviously great, but how they act is what's damning. They ask for publicly sourced cache data to preserve PlayStation Home, and claim to make it publicly available, since preservation on its face requires the game itself to be public so that, in the event one group goes down, anyone can still access it. This is not followed after June 23, 2022, despite Knight and others in Destination Home saying it will be publicly released, as all the data that is donated by the community is open source. Destination Home also utilizes the most popular PS3 emulator for its own version of PlayStation Home, that emulator being RPCS3. RPCS3 has a GPL 2.0 license that requires any fork of it to be open source, with the understanding that software should be free to use, and is doubly important as it serves as one of the best ways to play your favorite preserved games from the PS3. This is all fine and good until you see that Destination Home did not follow the GPL agreement and did not release source code, and even admitted to not complying by stating they took down their version of RPCS3 from GitHub so it could comply with the GPL 2.0 license. Destination Home defied the license binding preservation-focused principles to those who seek to use and distribute RPCS3, which is a key component of preserving the PlayStation 3 and its various games and software. Destination Home also spits in the face of PlayStation Home's preservation from other parties as well. With a mindset of cache data for me, but not for thee, they suggest to people who donated their cache data they not donate to other groups, citing past incidents which, although mostly true, lacked plenty of context in order to poison any chances of other groups getting cache data necessary to preserving PlayStation Home fully. Coupled with a project lead actively seeking another preservation group's destruction via conspiratorial operations and bootings against same said preservation group during events against people who just wanted to play PlayStation Home like they once did between the years of 2008 and 2015, this all just goes to show how truly anti-preservation Destination Home truly is. The predominant and most famous preservation group of PlayStation Home, known as Destination Home, lied to us and has proven themselves to be anti-preservation. From not sharing what should be totally public data so that PlayStation Home is never lost again, to actively going against others who wish to preserve and revive PlayStation Home, are just some things that no group claiming to be preservationists would do. These instances of misconduct not only show how anti-preservation Destination Home is, but how they mustn't be trusted unless major changes are made to their organization structure and staff. At the time of recording, Zeph has left Destination Home's Discord server. Destination Home is looking for new staff, and they seem to be working on making their version of RPCS3 comply with the GPL 2.0 license, which are only coming after major backlash, of course. After the release of Splicewave's video and the major waves it caused, Destination Home does actually now seem to give publicly available links to newly donated cache data. But what about the data between June 2022 and February 2025? Perhaps it will be released at some point, but at least at the time of filming, it's unknown how that situation will progress. However, on that front, it may not be all doom and gloom. After combing through the evidence Sly Cooper Reload Coded had documented in her highly researched documents, I actually reached out with questions that she graciously answered. Among the questions I asked, one is important to display here. I asked, quote, whether a true estimate or just an educated guess, how much of PlayStation Home has been preserved, unquote. To which she replied, I'd say 80%. The rest mostly consists of Japan-Asia content and limited time spaces like Motorstorm Sphere. Then I asked for some clarification, knowing that Destination Home hoards data. I asked regarding the percentage she gave the 80%, to which she replied, 80% has been collected, and 90% of that 80% is public, meaning Home Laboratory and Home Headquarters have access to it. Destination Home hoarding 10% of the 80% for themselves. 80% has been collected. For the totality of everything that Sony ever released on PlayStation Home, it's understood, it's expected, it's guessed that 80% of the whole entirety of it has been preserved. And 90% of that 80% is public. Destination Home hoarding 10% of the 80% for themselves. These are rough estimates, but it's assumed that Destination Home isn't hoarding as much as it looks like they are. This means that, at least to her estimates, if Destination Home continues their hoarding of the cache data, things are still mostly preserved. Unfortunately, though, most of what's left to be preserved is from Asian builds of PlayStation Home, which, with each passing day, has less of a chance and likelihood of being preserved. And this is actually why I wanted to make this video. I loved playing PlayStation Home when I was younger, and it would make me happy to see PlayStation Home preserved fully. Now, drama is expected since even when it was ran by Sony, PlayStation Home could be a pretty toxic place. But when actors in the revival scene are doing what I can only imagine is illegal and criminal acts, as well as engaging in clearly anti-preservation behaviors, well, that hurts the chances of PlayStation Home one day being fully preserved in not only its entirety, but for the rest of time. Now, if you don't know, preservation is difficult work and really only rewarding in the sense that you get to one day preserve your favorite game. But there's no money to be made, and there's really not much glory to be had either. Emulation is also a hassle, since gamers are mostly used to putting in a disc or downloading a game from an online store, then running it. And that's where Destination Home is planning on stepping up, actually. They're currently thinking about developing a PlayStation Home launcher that would make things easier for those seeking to play the game. Well, Zeph was, but I assume other people in Destination Home were also considering this, but there lies the problem. Innovation is great. But when it comes from a group who has lied in the past and spat in the face of the preservation efforts of PlayStation Home, how can you trust them? They've had project leads who'd hacked into and exploited vulnerabilities in another preservation group's PlayStation Home server. Who's to say they won't do anything malicious with their own release of PlayStation Home or RPCS3 or a launcher or any future software for their project? They're closed source, which normally can be totally fine, of course. I'm not saying everything has to be open source, although personally I think it should be, but that's besides the point. But with recent events, and their non-compliance to licenses as well as snarky combativeness when exposed, just further calls into question everything they've done and will continue to do. And honestly, I don't know what the solution is. Home Laboratory, after Destination Home, is the next best community for PlayStation Home's revival. They're open source and do a lot of the same things as Destination Home, like host events and have guides on how to download PlayStation Home, and even run your own server if you want. So an easy answer would be, ditch Destination Home and go to Home Laboratory. But that doesn't seem appropriate. Any preservation group looking to preserve PlayStation Home with all its spaces, items, features, and side activities is needed, because if talented people leave the scene or are totally ousted, the final result could be an only partially preserved PlayStation Home, which is something that might be prevented if there was less drama in the community. Now look, it's going to be impossible for the entire PlayStation Home revival scene to get together and be all friendly. But surely coexistence and honesty is possible, right? Although I don't particularly see a need for a closed source preservation project, if it is truly necessary for Destination Home to have some closed source elements, maybe they could vow to make any new features open source, or perhaps work with other preservation groups to also implement the same or similar features in an open source fashion, so each project will be roughly equal, but still promote friendly competition between groups. This could possibly help innovation and force changes on the way people in each group think when looking to implement certain features or make ease of access better, or maybe even go beyond the scope of what the original game had to just, make a better game. But with that all being said, something clearly needs to change. And hopefully the changes come in ways that benefit and propel the revival and preservation scene of PlayStation Home forward, and not backward. I would like to thank Sly Cooper Reload Coded once again for her coverage on the revival scene of PlayStation Home, as well as responding to me when asking for clarification and comment. Without her coverage, plenty of the screenshots showed in this video would not have appeared, and this video wouldn't have been as in-depth as it was. If you liked the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I make commentary videos and gaming videos. See ya!